Picture this. You are an American pilot in the Vietnam War on a routine mission. All appears to be normal when suddenly you hear a loud explosion and realize your plane has just been struck. You eject just in time to avoid being killed as the aircraft is swallowed by flames, with that being the last thing you see before blacking out. When you finally wake up, you find yourself in an unfamiliar jungle, alone. The sounds of the jungle fill your ears for a time before suddenly being interrupted by shouting and the sounds of breaking branches as you quickly find yourself surrounded by a group of angry-looking men with a variety of weapons before you feel a sharp blow to your head and fall into unconsciousness. This story was the experience of hundreds of Americans during the Vietnam War unfortunate enough to find themselves prisoners of the North Vietnamese Army. Despite being a signatory of the Geneva Convention regarding decent and humane treatment of POWs, this was far from the reality for those who fell into enemy hands. With regular treatment including a variety of torture such as beatings and long solitary confinement, these men had no choice but to endure the punishments. Among the many prisons used to house the POWs, one is remembered above the rest, that being the Hỏa Lò prison in Hanoi, or as it is often referred to today, the Hanoi Hilton. Originally built by the French during 1886 to 1901 during the French colonial rule, it was used to house a variety of prisoners, including political prisoners who sought freedom from French rule. Much later, when this independence had been achieved, it would be repurposed by the Democratic Republic of Vietnam to hold captured prisoners of war from the ongoing Vietnam War. Here, the prisoners would find no comfort within the dark, cold cells barely large enough to hold the hard, concrete beds they were shackled to. Communication between the men was strictly forbidden, making even the small comfort of their fellow prisoners difficult. In order to have even the smallest amount of contact with each other, the POWs began to use a tap code to send messages.
Holy Marm, I hear this. Mike McGrath, there is a code. Arrange the alphabet in 5 groups of 5. Leave out the letter K and tap once for the first group and then tap the letter. So I became a communicator thanks to Smitty Harris and the others who developed the communication system.
You got that code to a new guy, regardless of what it took. If you got caught doing it, that was part of the chance you take. But everybody got that tap code one way or another.
Many of these POWs were held for years, with individuals like Navy pilot Everett Alvarez remaining in the prison for almost a decade. These men were finally able to return to the U.S. following the end of the war, with a total of 591 men from the various camps being picked up during Operation Homecoming. Much of the prison was later demolished in the 90s, including the cells which held the POWs, with only some of the complex remaining as a museum. However, thanks to the efforts of one dedicated collector, several complete cells worth of materials were able to be saved from being destroyed and now form the newest exhibit at the American Heritage Museum. I was able to visit the museum myself and talk with their director of development about this amazing piece of history. Please enjoy this exclusive look at this incredible exhibit. Okay, hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today we are at the American Heritage Museum with Ryan, and we are going to be looking at one of their new exhibits. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the museum, Ryan, to start?
Sure, yeah. The American Heritage Museum was established in 2019. We opened to the public in 2019 to display primarily the Jacques Littlefield tank and armor collection that was part of the Military Vehicle Technical Foundation that was gifted to the Collings Foundation, our organization, back in 2013. We built this facility to be our first real brick and mortar public display. Before that time, we were flying World War II airplanes around the country, displaying at a bunch of different locations around the U.S., but this was our first time to actually put boots on the ground and tanks in a building here, because obviously you can't travel with tanks unless you've got a large caravan of trains to be able to transport them across the country. You have to have them in one spot. So we opened in 2019 with over 95 artifacts and rare vehicles, tanks, aircraft and such in the facility here. And it's, other than a couple of years during a pandemic, it's been a fantastic time. We get about 50,000 plus visitors a year. Myself, I am the Director of Development here. I've been with the Collings Foundation and the American Heritage Museum since 2001. And my passion is history and the aircraft and learning more about the tanks every single day, because I was more of an airplane person for a while. But it's great and a true honor to be here amongst these amazing artifacts, and to be around the veterans that served, and enthusiasts and historians, to truly see this building evolve and this whole museum evolve after a while. And we've, as you've seen probably in previous videos and such, we've developed this in a chronology of wars all the way from Revolutionary War through pretty much today.
Yep.
And so we've created these contexts of different wars, and have incorporated artifacts and tanks and vehicles, aircraft around them, so that when a visitor comes in here, they've got a great history lesson as they move through the whole museum here. And of course, these days, what we're finding is that the veteran community that come out, there's a lot of Vietnam era veterans that are out in our community. There's about 1.5 million Vietnam veterans that live right here in Massachusetts, and obviously in New England it expands even more. It's the largest veteran population in the country at this time, and they're getting of that age where they're 70, 80, 90 years old in some cases. Yep. And so we really wanted a way to build our exhibit and grow it a little bit more to be more relevant to this generation of people. So we've obviously added vehicles like the Walker Bulldog, the M48, and the PT-76 that served over there. We don't have the true icon of the Vietnam War yet, the UH-1 Huey, which everyone knows is really the dominant icon of the Vietnam War. But we were given a very, very unique opportunity to add a very, very special exhibit a couple of years ago when we were donated some really, really amazing artifacts.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. And I have to say, one of the things that I think this museum does better than any of the others that I've visited is the fact that you guys are constantly evolving the stuff that you're showing here. Like, I came here the other day and it was like a completely different museum experience than a couple months ago when I came. You've got a brand new plane featured, actually a couple new planes. You've also got moved around some stuff. And although we're not standing in front of it right now, you have a brand new exhibit showing the POW, which is what everybody clicked on for, which I guess we can walk over there and try to film as long as the audio isn't too bad. So now we're over in front of the Hanoi Hilton, and we're going to hear a little bit about how this came to be here, and about the fact that this is built out of the actual materials from the original Hanoi Hilton, which is kind of incredible to think about.
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the things as we were building the museum and looking at, what we wanted to expand this to and such, we always wanted to do something that honored the POWs that came back from Vietnam. We'd operated for years our F-4 Phantom and A-4 Skyhawk as part of the Vietnam Memorial Flight based out of our Houston location. So over the years we had met quite a few of the POWs that came back. And these were guys that were flying F-4s and A-4s and F-8 Crusaders and such that were shot down over there. And we wanted to do something that obviously helped people understand what they went through. And one of the things that we found here with the museum is that once we opened the museum, a lot of opportunities for exhibits kind of came to us. People recognized us and said, "Oh, this is a place that we wanted to give towards or offer this opportunity to have them display this." And one of those opportunities was pretty much 2 truckloads of the original bricks, floors, beds, shackles, doors that were actually disassembled and removed from the Hanoi Hilton, the Hỏa Lò prison in Hanoi back in the 1990s. And the way that this all came about is really, really kind of fascinating. I would love to write a book on it, honestly, because it's that whole inside knowledge and people that were kind of working things through. So our donor, Mr. Richards, he'd been friends with POWs for years and knew that he wanted to do something to honor these guys. And he had heard that sections of the Hỏa Lò prison were going to be demolished in the 1990s to make room for commercial development. Mm-hmm. Ironically enough, a hotel. And so sections of it were going to be demolished, which they were sections that were used to house American prisoners. An area called New Guy Village, which was where most of the guys came in and were housed in the early months of their incarceration. But he didn't have a way to get the whole, the stuff worked out, because he didn't have, local contacts in the area. So he worked with some local fixers, let's say facilitators, people that worked in behind the scenes on certain things, and ended up finding a person who held, both Canadian and Vietnamese citizenship. And he was able to work with the people that were demolishing the cells at the time and work that through, where they said, I want these cells. Mm-hmm. So they carefully took them apart, put them on pallets and such, 30 some odd pallets worth of bricks.
Wow.
With the mortar shipped away and such. They originally had the roof tiles to the area and such. And basically they were, for some money transfer and maybe some favors, who knows exactly what it was, but we're able to get those and ship those to Canada, because at the time there was no trade relations with the United States, so they needed to get them out of at least Vietnam and get them to Canada. Of course, the Canadian government looked at it, and some of the stuff, because it had, various biological materials on it, mold and that kind of thing, mm-hmm. they had to, confiscate some of the stuff. But for the most part, it made it over there perfectly fine. And then eventually, when they were able to, they brought it down to the United States, and they started, Mr. Richards started looking at other locations to potentially give this to rebuild, to create some sort of a tribute to these guys. Several museums weren't sure about the provenance to it, which is always something.
Yeah.
They didn't have photographs of when it was, when it was being taken down. They didn't know what the chain of custody was. So it eventually came to us through the Marine Aviation Museum in Houston, Texas, which is a flying organization. Houston, Texas doesn't actually have a museum. They were donated the material, but they didn't have a place to display it, so then that museum donated it to us. And we started going, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to put this all together? So we contacted a number of the original Nam POW group. There's about 300 of the Vietnam POWs that are still alive with us today. A lot of the guys from the Hanoi Hilton came, connected with us, and through Zoom calls and on-site visitation, they were basically able to tell us, this is how it's going to be constructed, this is what it's supposed to look like, this is how it's going to work. So over the term of a couple of months, we worked this all together, and then we realized 2013 is the 50th anniversary of Operation Homecoming, when all these guys were brought back to the United States, starting on February 12th. Okay. So we said, we need to get this done before that time. So we literally started this project in July of last year, July of 2022, and really quickly put it all together. Just went full bore on it. We had the space, we had the plan, so we put it together. We had a restoration masonry company come in and actually put the cells back together the way that they were with the original material. The original beds, the original shackles, the original door painted up in, as I like to call it, communist green, because it's that thick green paint that you see inside of every single Eastern Bloc tank. We were able to, put the kind of skim coat plaster on the outside to make it look like it was. And people, Vietnam veterans, actual POWs have come in and said, yeah, this is what it looked like. Of course, we also added other elements like the anti-aircraft gun that obviously was part of the shoot-down procedure. We added a replica of the Nobby room, which is the interrogation room that was that these guys spent a lot of very, very painful days in. Mm-hmm. So we added those elements into it to just add more to the entire experience. But we wanted folks to be able to get the experience of actually being inside the cell without being inside the cell. So we came up with the idea to break down one of the walls, and so that you're actually looking from an adjacent cell into the original cell. Yep. And you see the beds and the shackles that guys like James Stockdale or John McCain or Bud Day, their feet would have been in those shackles. We don't know, obviously, but this was, the same prison that was used during that time period. So very well could have been the beds that they laid on for days or even months at that point.
Yeah, and they're not much of beds, that's for sure. It's literally concrete slabs, so it would not have been very comfortable. Yeah. But I mentioned it before we started filming, I think, that I came here probably a couple months before, and this area was roped off, but the speed at which it was done is incredible. I came in with a friend who was back in town, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know they finished that. So we were able to walk in there and check it out, which is what spurred me to make this video with you, because I don't think a lot of people will have known that this is here, and this is something that's exclusive to only this museum. You're not going to find this anywhere else.
Right.
So if you want to see this, I highly recommend you come and check it out, because it is very well worth it.
Yeah, the only other place you can find this is elements still over in Hanoi. They built the Maison Centrale prison. The actual original exterior looks almost exactly like this, much larger scale and such, but the original prison is still a museum over there. But they're talking more about the use of the prison in French colonial days. Okay. So it was prior to the Vietnam War. So they talk about their own people. Mm-hmm. The fact that Ho Chi Minh was actually imprisoned before the establishment of North Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh was actually imprisoned in the Hỏa Lò Maison Centrale prison by the French colonials. So it's very, very poignant to their story over there. And they don't really talk very much about the American POWs, because that's still something that's very, very problematic. So outside of Vietnam, this is the only place that you'll see the original artifact.
Yeah, so I'll leave links obviously down below to people who want to come and check this out, because I highly recommend it if you're in either the Boston or just honestly New England. New England's small enough you can drive here within a couple hours from anywhere. So if you have the opportunity, I highly recommend it. But I think now we're going to be able to move over and check out some of the sort of behind the scenes stuff that you probably won't be able to see when you come here over in one of the other buildings. So we'll let the cameraman have a break on his arm for a few minutes when we go over there. So now we're out in the hangar area with all the planes, which you can see on their open house days, like their demo days. But this is where they have the remainder of the bricks and everything, as you can see in front of us.
Yeah. So we were given literally, 30 some odd pallets this size of them. We used about half of them because there were 2 cells. So we used about half of them for the exhibit. So this is the remainder. And we're going to be working with other museums to find good homes for this. Maybe another museum would like to build up another cell and such. There's some things that we don't have. We don't have extras of doors or the transom windows and that kind of thing. We've got bricks, we've got a floor, and we've got the beds. So this is how they basically came to us. These were original bricks. We estimate these bricks were probably cast somewhere in the early 1900s. The original prison was built by the French colonial government in the late 1800s. So the construction, the way that these bricks were and such, they figured that these were probably an addition to the original prison. So when the workers were disassembling the cells and such, they were nice enough to chip off the mortar, because these would have been covered by a plaster on the outside. That's why they're in good condition. The mortar itself, we were actually able to determine what the composition of the mortar was, which is actually a lot of shell. There's a lot of seashell into this because that's part of the whole sand environment of the area. So we were able to replicate the mortar based on the remainders that were on here, and you can see some of the seashells on this thing. But we basically got all of these, and there's a whole section of original bricks, and then there were also these makeup bricks that when the Canadians found some that had mold and such on them, they destroyed those original bricks, but they said, okay, here are some bricks to replace that. So we've got some Canadian bricks that we haven't used in here, but those are new and such. So we have
those extremely polite Canadians.
Exactly. We're so sorry. But these are the original bricks from it. Of course, it's hard because you'll see in the actual exhibit, most of the brick is actually covered up by the plaster that we have in there. But behind some of the signs that we have some of the original brick that you can see the construction of the original brick behind the signs. They're like translucent signs in the construction. And then also in that whole deconstructed cell, the broken down brick wall, you see the original brick inside there, so people can see what the construction looks like on that. So the bricks, we've got some of those still left, and this is what they looked like before we started it. The other things that we got We were given this, this is one of the original floor slabs. They would have either been floor or ceiling slabs. They were pretty much of the same type. And it's a very, very loose, kind of ugly aggregate. It's just very, very poorly put together because obviously they're raw materials. They didn't have a lot to work with and such. So this is one half of the cell, basically. They were two pieces that were cast and they were put in side by side to each other, and that's what they made up the cell with. In this area, it was more modular construction versus pouring the concrete on site and such. So this is one of the floor slabs that we have, and then over here, these are two of the beds that we have, and like you said earlier, bed is a very, very loose term.
Yeah.
They literally, these were in state. They were given very little extra comfort, no blankets, nothing else. I mean, of course, you're in the jungle environment at that time, so it's hot, it's humid and such, so you may have not wanted it, but in terms of comfort, there is no such thing on these, especially with the shackles. So these are the original shackles. We have the armature bar for the other one over there just in storage, but some of these were attached right directly to the beds, and we don't want to get rid of them. But it's extraordinarily humbling to think, guys like Av Alvarez or Robert Shoemaker, those guys were 7 years in this.
Yeah.
Could you imagine every single night silently, you might be in solitary confinement at the time, or even later on when they started to be able to, be around other people, they still weren't able to talk. Here you are silently night after night, laying down many times with your feet in shackles at that point, unable to walk, unable to talk. And you sometimes wonder, where's the hope?
Yeah.
When do you think you're going to go home? Are you ever going to go home? Are you just going to die there and such? So it's humbling to think that of the nights that were spent on that these guys went through, but the fact that many of them came back and they were able to take what they experienced over there and come back and turn it into something positive, I think is a real tribute to what the fortitude of some of these guys were. But obviously, many of them say to this very day, they're still haunted by it.
Yeah.
And it never goes away. It never goes away.
Like you said, it's humbling to think because, we in the States, we think it's tough, you think going out camping, sleeping on the ground is bad. This would be even worse than sleeping on the ground. So it's really just it's humbling, like you said, to think that the soldiers that go overseas deal with things like this and even worse in some cases.
Absolutely.
And just basically so that we can have the comforts that we have. And people, I think, forget that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the goals that we have to the exhibit. The Hanoi Hilton prison exhibit is to give people that feeling of gratitude for those who served and have sacrificed. Obviously the museum has a lot talking about those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
But there are various levels of that, and I think in some cases a living sacrifice can be almost as difficult, if not sometimes worse, because you carry this through the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're not just impacting yourself either. You're impacting those around you. There were a lot of wives and families of these POWs that for the first years of their imprisonment, they didn't know if they were alive or dead. They were missing in action at that time. And if it wasn't for guys like Hegdahl, who were released early and memorized every one of the prisoners that he remembered in the prison so he could come back home and tell everyone, this is who's over there. And they could start saying, okay, we need to start getting these guys back.
Yeah.
That impact on everyone else in your family, it's incredible to think that they came back. And I mean, some of these guys, like John McCain, became senators, or this, admirals. They stayed in the military. Heck, some of these guys even came back and went back on flying duty in some cases. Yeah. So it's incredible to see. It's inspirational for our visitors to see, the strength of the human spirit, that you can overcome such terrible stuff and still come back and make something out of it.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on that. The fact that just the strength of the character and just the mental fortitude that the guys must have had, because you're going from easily one of the worst experiences you could have as a human being, and then coming back to the luxuries and people who don't even understand what you could have gone through, people who the worst thing that they've ever had is a flat tire, and they can't fathom the horror that you went through, and then being able to basically keep that and move forward with your life. It's incredible.
Yeah. One of the things that I always love to talk about is that this was a different generation of people too. These guys that were over there, many of them were flying, combat missions and F4s and stuff. They were, in some cases, Korean War veterans, or even some cases, World War II veterans. Like Robin Olds, who never was a POW, but he fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam as flying F4 Phantoms at that time. So these guys were a different group of people, and they were able to come up with ways to, bide the time, because that was the thing. The isolation and the silence was one of the toughest things that you had to go through. But they found ways of communicating, which I think is amazing. The whole tap code concept, where they were able to learn, from other prisoners just by tapping. You hear it, that kind of thing. And it's not Morse code. It's a completely different code, because they knew that the Vietnamese knew Morse code, so they came up with their own code. And they were able to talk to each other. They were able to learn other languages. Basically find a way to bide the time as best as they possibly could, because what else are you going to do? Sit there and think about how tough of a position you're in. That's about it. But some of the folks, like in the case of Bob Shoemaker, who was the second shoot down, he was an Apollo candidate. So he was flying. These were not guys that were just day-to-day grunts. A lot of these guys were very, very highly accomplished individuals before they even came over there.
Well, I think that's pretty much all that we can really show here. You really need to come here to see the exhibit yourself to really get the full experience. And if you want to tell us a little bit about where this is and the hours and everything that people can come by, hopefully we can help you hit that 70,000 visitor goal for next year, or for this year.
Yeah. So we're located strategically between Boston and Worcester, Massachusetts, about 30 miles outside of Boston. So if you're flying into Boston Airport, the Logan Airport, about 30 miles outside of town. We're located in Hudson, Massachusetts, which is a little town right along Route 495, one of the major ring roads around Boston area. Pretty easy to get to if you're coming from any points in the New England area. We're open each week, Wednesday through Sunday, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day. We always tell everybody, allocate at least 2 or 3 hours. Especially this audience. Everybody that's watching is probably going to be about a 3 to 4 hour person, because you're a different type of folks. But you can come out here, and we have docents on site that can tell you all about the different experiences and such. If you want to come over and see the hangar, and we also have a car museum too. We open those up during our special event weekends during the summertime, because it is, as you'll attribute to, it's cold in here right now.
It's a bit chilly, and like I said, I'll leave a link down below so you can check for the events and stuff.
Absolutely.
And I'll probably try to post this year. I'll be coming down for some of the events, so if you want to potentially meet up with me, or mainly just see the exhibit, I'm not very interesting, you can come down and check it out. It's very, very worth the visit. And make sure that when you do it, you go through the entry and through the trench and everything. You don't want to miss that, especially on a first visit. After the first visit, you can skip through, but don't just walk through into the main area. It's well worth going through that presentation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for those who are photographers and such, yes, we do allow tripods. Yes, we do allow flash photography, so you can bring that along. And heck, if you want to do video and stuff, come on down. We want you to share it with as many people as possible. Instagram it, Facebook it, YouTube it, whatever you want to do. We want you to help us share what we have here.
Yeah, I'd hope it's allowed, otherwise we're in big trouble. But thank you very much for the time.
We appreciate it.
Hopefully we can meet back up and do some more filming, because you guys have so many new things that you're adding that I'd love to cover it. I'd love to come down here as much as possible, really, and get some footage for you guys. I think hopefully next time I'll be able to cover the Ho Road that I promised back in my Panzer I video, so we'll see about that.
Thanks again to Ryan and the American Heritage Museum for the ability to showcase this exhibit for you. I hope to work with them more in the future with content like this, as well as of their amazing collection of armored vehicles, so if you enjoyed this video, please show it by leaving a comment below and sharing the video so that I can show them that there is interest among my viewers for this type of content. As I mentioned before, I will leave links to their website below if you'd like to visit the museum for yourself, and if they ask, let them know I sent you. Huge thanks to my channel members and my new Cone Archive supporters for helping make things like this financially possible. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, consider checking out one of the ones popping up on your screen, which YouTube has read your inner desires to predict you will enjoy them. I'll see you there.